You look sad, mister. Want to meet my mummy? The millionaire CEO froze when he saw her mother's face. A great love and heartwarming story. Hi, my precious garden flowers. Before we begin today's story, please pause and close your eyes with me. Let me cover you in the most tender, healing prayer from the depths of my heart. Dear God, tonight, I lift up every beautiful soul listening right now. Breathe peace into their storms. Where there's confusion, give clarity. Where there's heartbreak, send healing. Where there's fear, let them feel your embrace. Protect their homes, bless their families, and give rest to their tired hearts. Let them know they are seen, they are loved, and they are never alone. Amen. My sweet family, I missed you more than words can carry. There's a secret only Binta knows. The night I stopped telling stories, I cried like a child because my heart felt empty without you. Even now, I'm still healing, still learning to breathe through the pain. Maybe my voice isn't what it used to be. Maybe my writing has faltered a little. But my love for you, it has only grown deeper, stronger, unshakable. Each second of this video was made with trembling hands and a soul full of hope. Please, don't skip a second. Watch it till the end. Let me walk with you through every line, every emotion, every heartbeat. And if my stories ever brought you comfort, I ask for just one promise today. Our channel is struggling, but we are not giving up. Please recommend our channel to at least 3 family members or friends today. If you can do that, type it boldly in the comments. Promise, my brother, Mr. Peter, and remember, over 400 heartfelt stories are already waiting for you here. They were written with nothing but pure love. For you, my family, my garden of flowers. Hold my hand, walk with me, and let's rise again, together. The city of New York had forgotten how to show mercy, but Kirk Liles had mastered its language of steel and indifference, until a child with amber eyes shattered his armor with one simple question about his sadness. February's bitter wind sliced through Manhattan's financial district, sending pedestrians racing for warmth, but Kirk Liles walked untouched through the chaos. At 45, he commanded a billion-dollar empire, owned properties across 3 continents, and could reshape markets with a phone call. Yet tonight, something gnawed at him, a restlessness that neither endless work nor expensive scotch could silence. Maybe it was tomorrow's engagement announcement binding him to Calliope Winters, the calculating socialite whose ambition matched his own. A strategic merger, his board called it. Everything a man in his position should want. So why did he feel like drowning? The Liles Industries Tower stretched 40 stories above him, its glass facade reflecting city lights like a monument to his success. Kirk paused, watching late-shift workers stream from the lobby, faces glowing blue from their phones. Once, he'd been like them, hungry, desperate, clawing upward from nothing. Now he stood at the summit, and the view was breathtakingly empty. "Excuse me, mister." The voice cut through urban noise, small but crystal clear. Kirk looked down to find a little girl beside him, barely reaching his waist. She couldn't have been more than 8, with rich brown skin that seemed to glow under streetlights and natural curls framing her face like a halo. But her eyes stopped his breath. Large, expressive amber with dancing gold flecks. "You look so sad, mister," she continued, tilting her head with fearless child curiosity. "Are you lost? Want to meet my mommy? She says lonely hearts need healing, and she makes amazing hot chocolate that fixes almost anything." Kirk stared at this tiny stranger, his social defenses crumbling. When had anyone last seen sadness instead of success? When had anyone cared enough to notice the emptiness behind his facade? "I'm not lost," he heard himself say, voice rougher than intended. "I know exactly where I am. But do you know who you are?" The question came with innocent wisdom that cracked something in his chest, like ice breaking after endless winter. Footsteps approached rapidly, Azalea! There you are, baby girl. I told you to wait by the... The voice stopped. Kirk looked up and felt reality tilt. Before him stood a woman who belonged in Renaissance masterpieces, skin like polished mahogany, features so striking they could inspire sonnets. Dark waves cascaded around her shoulders, and her simple burgundy coat hugged curves with understated elegance. But her eyes, those same amber depths her daughter inherited, hit him with devastating recognition. Regina Wilson. The name detonated in his mind like salvation and damnation combined. 10 years. 10 years since he'd seen her face, heard her laugh, felt her touch. 10 years since he'd made the most catastrophic mistake of his life and let her walk away. Now, here she stood, more beautiful than memory dared preserve, looking at him with shock, recognition, and something that might have been pain. Kirk? His name fell from her lips like a whispered secret. Regina. He couldn't manage more, couldn't trust his voice not to betray the earthquake in his chest. The little girl, Azalea, looked between them with bright curiosity. Do you know each other? That's wonderful. Mommy, this is the sad mister I was telling you about. I think he really needs that hot chocolate. Regina's composure was admirable. Her hand found her daughter's shoulder protectively, but her voice remained steady. We knew each other long ago, sweetheart. How long ago? Azalea asked with relentless childhood curiosity. Regina's eyes met Kirk's for a heartbeat, and in that glance he saw echoes of their last night together. Passion, promises, the devastating morning when pride and fear drove them apart. A very long time, Regina said softly. Kirk studied the child more closely, noting delicate features that seemed familiar, graceful movements, intelligence sparking in those golden eyes. Something twisted in his stomach, recognition too dangerous to acknowledge. We should go, Regina said, protective instincts overriding whatever emotion seeing him had stirred. Come on, Azalea. But the girl wasn't ready to leave. She looked up at Kirk with earnest concern. Will you be okay, mister? You still look sad, maybe even sadder than before. Kirk knelt to her level. Up close, the resemblance to Regina was unmistakable, but there was something else, something in her nose's shape, her jaw's line that made his heart pound with possibility and terror. What's your full name, sweetheart? Azalea Wilson, she replied proudly. I'm 8 years old and I'm in 3rd grade. I like painting like Mommy, and I can read chapter books all by myself. 8 years old. Kirk's brain did the math in an instant, and the result struck him square in the chest. 8 years had passed since that volcanic breakup with Regina. 8 years since that final fevered night when they'd made love like it was their last breath, right before their entire world collapsed. He lifted his eyes to Regina and saw her watching him, panic flickering beneath the surface like she could read his thoughts. Her jaw was set, her posture tense, her entire body sending one clear message: she wanted to leave. Thank you for being so kind, Azalea, Kirk said, his voice level despite the emotional tempest brewing inside. You were right, I was sad, but meeting you has been the best moment of my whole day. Azalea's face lit up. See, Mommy, I told you he just needed someone to care. Everybody needs somebody who notices them. Yes, sweetie, Regina replied softly, her voice thick with feeling. Everybody does. She gave her daughter's hand a gentle pull. We really have to go now. Your dinner's getting cold. As they began to walk away, Kirk stood up quickly. Regina, wait. She froze in place but didn't turn. He could see the stiffness in her back, the way she squared her shoulders like someone preparing for a fight. I know I'm not the person you want to talk to, he said, moving forward slightly but keeping a respectful distance. And I understand I don't have the right to ask anything of you. But could we talk? Just for a minute? At last, she turned to face him, and the look in her eyes nearly undid him. There was so much there, memories, pain, loss, and something that just might be the ghost of longing. "There's nothing to say, Kirk," she said quietly. "That was another life." "Was it?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them, raw and unguarded in a way the composed corporate Kirk Lyles never allowed himself to be. For a flicker of a moment, something softened in her face. The hint of the woman who once loved him with everything she had. But it disappeared just as quickly. "Goodbye, Kirk." He stood motionless, watching them disappear into the crowd, Azalea's small hand secure in her mother's. On that Manhattan street corner, something inside him cracked open. For the first time in 10 years, he felt truly awake. And for the first time in his adult life, he had no idea what he was supposed to do next. But one thing was clear: seeing Regina again had demolished every wall around his heart. And the little girl with golden eyes who had asked him about his sadness, she might be the key to questions he'd never dared speak aloud. The wind howled through the skyscraper canyons, but Kirk didn't feel its chill anymore. He was burning from within, lit by fear, wonder, and a desperate need to uncover the truth about Azalea Wilson. His phone buzzed with messages from Calliope about wedding arrangements, but for the first time in years, Kirk ignored the rhythm of his structured life. Instead, he stood on that New York street, frozen in place, watching a woman and a child walk away. Two strangers who had just reminded him what it meant to have a soul. Chapter 2. Ghosts of Yesterday, rewritten. Memory is a harsh designer, crafting monuments to the things we've lost while time steadily eats away at everything we thought we knew. About love, about pain, about betrayal. Regina Wilson had spent 10 long years building armor around her heart, layering protection over every hurt Kirk Lyles had left behind. And yet, one brief encounter, 5 minutes on a Manhattan sidewalk, had taken it all down, reducing her defenses to rubble. She felt as exposed now as she had the morning she woke up alone in that hotel bed, her dreams lying in pieces around her. Now, 3 days later, she stood in the calm of her small but elegant art gallery in Soho, gazing at a painting that had haunted her ever since she created it. The canvas portrayed a man cloaked in shadow, his face hidden, but his body radiating sorrow and remorse. She'd painted it 2 years ago during a stretch of sleepless nights, when Kirk's memory would rise up no matter how deeply she tried to bury it. She'd never been sure why she kept the painting, why she hadn't painted over it or thrown it away like she had with others. Now she understood. Her artist's intuition had captured something real, Kirk's posture on that street corner just days ago, wealthy, composed, and devastatingly alone. "Mommy, you're looking at the sad picture again." Regina turned toward the voice and saw Azalea perched on a stool behind the gallery's front counter, her little hands covered in paint from the art project she'd been working on. Her daughter's comment was delivered in that simple, unfiltered honesty only children possess, cutting straight through to truths adults spend a lifetime avoiding. "I wasn't staring, baby girl. I was thinking about the sad man from the other night." Azalea's golden eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I've been thinking about him too. Do you think someone gave him hot chocolate? He really looked like he needed it." Regina's heart clenched. Even 3 days later, Azalea hadn't stopped talking about the mysterious man who'd looked so lonely. Her daughter had an uncanny ability to see straight through to people's souls, a gift that Regina both admired and feared. Because if Azalea could sense Kirk's sadness so easily, what else might she eventually see? "I'm sure he's fine, sweetheart," Regina said, though the words felt hollow on her tongue. "Some people just carry sadness differently than others." "Like you do," Azalea said with startling insight. "You paint your sadness. Maybe that's what he needs. to paint his feelings instead of keeping them all locked up inside. Regina moved to her daughter's side, pressing a kiss to the top of her curly head. "When did you get so wise?" "Grandma Estelle says I got it from you. She says artists see the world differently, and that's both a blessing and a burden." Azalea looked up at her with those knowing eyes. "Did you love him, Mommy? The sad mister?" The question hit Regina like a physical blow. She'd known this moment would come eventually. Azalea was too perceptive, too intelligent to miss the emotional undercurrents that had crackled between her parents that night. But knowing hadn't made her any more prepared for the raw honesty of her daughter's curiosity. "That's a very grown-up question, baby." "I'm almost 9, Azalea pointed out with the dignity of someone who considered herself practically an adult. "And you always tell me that feelings aren't something to be ashamed of. So did you." Regina sank onto the stool beside her daughter, suddenly feeling every one of her 35 years. "Yes," she whispered. "I loved him very much." What happened? How could she explain to an 8-year-old the complicated dance of pride and fear that had destroyed the most important relationship of her life? How could she describe the way Kirk's success had begun to overwhelm their love? The way his need to prove himself had slowly pushed her further and further away until she'd felt like a stranger in his world? How could she admit that she'd been too proud to fight for them when she'd thought he'd chosen his ambition over their future? "Sometimes love isn't enough," Regina said finally. "Sometimes people want different things, or they're not ready to love each other the way they deserve to be loved." "But you're both different now," Azalea said with the simple logic of childhood. "You're older and wiser. Maybe you could love each other better this time." Regina's throat tightened. If only it were that simple. If only the past could be erased, and second chances came without the weight of old wounds and secrets that could destroy everything. The gallery's bell chimed, announcing a visitor. Regina looked up, expecting to see Mirabelle Sinclair, her best friend, and the owner of the gallery next door, who often stopped by for afternoon coffee and gossip. Instead, she found herself face to face with the very ghost she'd been trying to exorcise. Kirk Lyles stood in her doorway like a vision from another life, but this wasn't the impeccably groomed corporate titan she'd encountered on the street. His usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his expensive suit looked rumpled, as though he'd slept in it. Most striking of all were his eyes, those piercing blue depths that had once made her feel like the only woman in the world now held a vulnerability that took her breath away. "Hello, Regina." His voice was softer than she remembered, roughened by emotion in a way that the old Kirk would never have allowed. This was a man who had learned something about pain in the years since they'd parted, and the knowledge of his suffering called to something deep in her heart, despite every rational thought screaming at her to protect herself. Kirk. She stood slowly, acutely aware of Azalea's fascinated gaze moving between them. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see your work," he said, his eyes already moving around the gallery, taking in the paintings that lined the walls. "I heard you had your own place now. It's beautiful, Regina, just like I always knew it would be." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. This was the Kirk she remembered falling in love with, the one who had seen her dreams before she'd even dared to voice them, who had believed in her talent when she'd still been struggling to believe in herself. "It's the sad mister," Azalea exclaimed, hopping off her stool with excitement. "You came back! Did you find someone to give you hot chocolate?" Kirk's face transformed as he looked at her daughter, and Regina saw something that made her blood run cold. Recognition. Not the simple recognition of meeting someone recently, but something deeper, more primal. The way a man might look at his own reflection in an old photograph. Hello again, Azalea, Kirk said, kneeling to her level just as he had on the street. I haven't had any hot chocolate yet, but I've been thinking about your offer. Mommy makes the best hot chocolate in the whole world, Azalea declared with pride. She puts cinnamon and vanilla, and sometimes even a tiny bit of cayenne pepper to make it special. Would you like some? Azalea, Regina interrupted, her voice sharper than she'd intended. Why don't you go wash your hands? You're covered in paint. Her daughter looked between them with that too perceptive gaze, clearly sensing the undercurrents of tension and emotion that were charging the air between her parents. Okay, Mommy, she said finally, but she paused at Kirk's side. Don't leave while I'm gone, okay? I want to show you my painting. Kirk's throat worked as he swallowed hard. I'll be here when you get back. I promise. After Azalea disappeared into the small bathroom at the back of the gallery, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Regina wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling chilled despite the warmth of the afternoon. She's remarkable, Kirk said quietly, rising to his full height. Intelligent, intuitive, kind. You've done an incredible job raising her. Don't. The word came out sharper than she'd intended. Don't you dare come here and try to charm me with compliments about my daughter. Our daughter. The words hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Regina felt the blood drain from her face, felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble around the edges. I don't know what you're talking about. She's 8 years old, Regina. 8 years since our last night together. 8 years since you disappeared from my life without a word, and she has my eyes. Not the color, but the shape. The way they tilt slightly at the corners. She has my grandmother's nose, and when she smiles, she gets the same dimple in her left cheek that I had as a child. Regina's hands were shaking now, her breathing coming in short, sharp bursts. She'd known this moment would come eventually, had rehearsed what she would say, how she would handle it, but all her preparations crumbled in the face of Kirk's quiet certainty. You left, she whispered, the words torn from some deep place in her soul. You chose your company over us. You made it clear that love wasn't enough, that I wasn't enough, so I did what I had to do to protect myself and my child. Your child, Kirk's voice cracked on the words. Regina, she's mine too, isn't she? Look me in the eyes and tell me Azalea isn't my daughter. She wanted to lie. God help her. She wanted to protect them both from the chaos that this truth would bring. But looking into Kirk's eyes, those piercing blue depths that saw too much, that had always been able to read her soul, she found she couldn't form the words. I did what I thought was best, she said instead, tears threatening to spill over. You were already engaged to someone else when I found out I was pregnant. Your assistant made it very clear that you'd moved on, that your relationship with Calliope Winters was serious. What was I supposed to do? Show up on your doorstep and beg for scraps of your attention? Engaged? Kirk looked genuinely confused. Regina, I wasn't engaged 10 years ago. I didn't even meet Calliope until 3 years ago. The world tilted beneath Regina's feet. But your assistant said, What assistant? Regina, what exactly were you told? Before she could answer, Azalea's voice rang out from the back of the gallery. Mommy, I can't reach the soap. Coming, baby, Regina called back, her voice thick with tears. She looked at Kirk, seeing the pain and confusion in his eyes, knowing that her own face reflected the same devastation. I know. Kirk stepped back, giving her space, even though every line of his body suggested he wanted to reach for her. But Regina, this isn't over. We need to talk, really talk, about what happened, about Azalea, about everything. I can't, she whispered. Not now, not like this. Then when? The question was gentle but insistent. I've missed 8 years of my daughter's life, Regina. 8 years of birthdays and bedtime stories and scraped knees and first days of school. I know I don't have the right to demand anything from you, but please, don't make me miss any more. Regina looked at this man who had once held her heart in his hands, who had shaped her capacity for love and broken her ability to trust, who had given her the greatest gift of her life without even knowing it. She saw the pain in his eyes, the regret, the desperate hope, and felt something crack open in her chest. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "after Azalea goes to school, we can talk then." Kirk nodded, relief flooding his features. "Thank you." As Azalea's footsteps approached, Kirk headed for the door. But he paused with his hand on the handle, looking back at Regina with an expression that reminded her achingly of the young man she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day." And then he was gone, leaving Regina standing in her gallery, surrounded by the artwork of her heart, knowing that everything she'd built to protect herself and her daughter was about to change forever. Chapter 3. Walls Built. High fear builds the tallest walls, but love has always been the most patient architect of their destruction. Regina Wilson hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kirk's face in her gallery. The raw pain when he'd realized the truth about Azalea, the way his voice had cracked when he'd spoken about missing 8 years of his daughter's life. She'd replayed their conversation endlessly, each repetition revealing new layers of the miscommunication that had stolen their happiness. Standing outside Azalea's school on a crisp March morning, Regina watched her daughter run toward the building with her usual boundless energy, backpack bouncing against her small frame. Other parents chatted around her, discussing playdates and soccer practices, living the simple, uncomplicated lives that Regina had never quite managed to achieve. "Mummy seems sad today," Azalea had observed over breakfast, those perceptive golden eyes studying Regina's face. "Are you thinking about the sad mister again?" Regina had deflected with kisses and promises of afternoon art time, but her daughter's intuition was becoming harder to dodge. Azalea was too smart, too observant, and the emotional upheaval of the past few days was affecting her whether Regina wanted to admit it or not. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, though she recognized the formal tone immediately. "I'll be at Central Perk Cafe on Spring Street at 2 p.m. I hope you'll come. Kirk." Regina stared at the message, her heart racing. She'd agreed to talk, but seeing it in writing made it real in a way that terrified her. In 3 hours, she would sit across from the father of her child and try to explain 8 years of silence, 8 years of raising their daughter alone, 8 years of telling herself she'd made the right choice. The gallery was quieter than usual when she arrived, most of her regular browsers seemingly deterred by the grey March weather. Regina tried to focus on her work, cataloguing new pieces and updating her website, but her hands shook every time she thought about the approaching conversation. At 1:30, Mirabelle Sinclair swept through the door like a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly coiffed and her designer coat billowing dramatically behind her. "Darling, you look absolutely dreadful," Mirabelle announced, with the brutal honesty that had made her both Regina's closest friend and most feared critic. "What's happened? And don't tell me it's just gallery stress. I know that face. That's heartbreak face." Regina sank onto her stool behind the counter, suddenly exhausted. "Kirk Lyles is back." Mirabelle's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose toward her hairline. "The Kirk Lyles? Your Kirk Lyles, the billionaire heartbreaker who shall not be named?" "He's not my anything," Regina said quickly. "But yes, he found me. He found us." "And?" Mirabelle perched on the edge of the counter with predatory interest. "What did the beautiful bastard want?" "He knows about Azalea." The words came out in a rush. "He figured it out immediately." And Belle, I think I made a terrible mistake 10 years ago. For the first time in their friendship, Mirabelle Sinclair was speechless. She stared at Regina for a long moment, then reached over and squeezed her hand. Tell me everything. Regina found herself pouring out the story. The miscommunication about Kirk's engagement, the years of silence, the way seeing him again had awakened feelings she'd thought were long buried. Mirabelle listened without judgment, occasionally offering tissues when Regina's voice broke. "So what are you going to do?" Mirabelle asked when Regina finished. "I don't know. He wants to be part of Azalea's life, and I understand that. But Belle, I'm terrified. What if he tries to take her from me? What if he decides that his world is better for her than mine?" "What if he doesn't?" Mirabelle countered gently. "Regina, darling, you've spent 8 years creating an entire narrative about why Kirk abandoned you. What if the story you've been telling yourself isn't true?" Regina glanced at her watch. 1:50. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I have to go," she whispered. "Yes, you do," Mirabelle agreed. "And Regina? Be brave. That little girl deserves to know her father, and you deserve to know the truth about what really happened." Central Perk Cafe was exactly the kind of place Regina might have chosen. Small, intimate, with mismatched furniture and local artwork on the walls. She spotted Kirk immediately, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall, 2 untouched coffee cups in front of him. He looked up when she entered, and the relief in his eyes was almost painful to witness. "You came," he said as she approached. "I said I would." Regina slid into the chair across from him, accepting the coffee he pushed toward her. Her hands were trembling, and she wrapped them around the warm mug to hide the evidence of her nerves. "Regina, before we talk about anything else, I need you to know something." Kirk's voice was steady, but she could see the tension in the set of his shoulders. "I was never engaged 10 years ago. I don't know who told you that or why, but it's not true. Your assistant—" "I didn't have an assistant 10 years ago. I was barely keeping my company afloat. Regina, the night you left was the night I was going to propose to you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Regina felt the color drain from her face, felt the world tilt dangerously around her. "What?" Kirk reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, worn around the edges as if it had been handled countless times over the years. He set it on the table between them with shaking hands. "I bought this the day before our last night together. I had this whole speech planned. I was going to tell you that none of my success meant anything without you, that I wanted to build a life together, have children together, grow old together." His voice broke slightly. "But when I woke up and you were gone, I thought you'd realized you deserved better." Regina stared at the ring box, her vision blurring with tears. "Someone called me, a woman. She said she was your assistant, that you'd instructed her to inform me that your relationship with Calliope Winters was becoming serious and that you wouldn't be available for casual encounters anymore." Kirk's face went white, then flushed with anger. Calliope. The name came out like a curse. She must have found out about us somehow, decided to eliminate the competition before it became a threat. But how could she have known? She was dating my business partner at the time, Hadrian Blackwood. She would have had access to my calendar, my contacts. Kirk's hands clenched into fists. "Regina, I have been searching for you for 10 years. I hired private investigators. I followed every lead. I never stopped hoping I'd find you again." The magnitude of the deception was staggering. 10 years of believing she'd been discarded like a casual fling. 10 years of raising their daughter alone. 10 years of building walls around her heart to protect herself from a betrayal that had never actually happened. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Kirk, I'm so sorry. If I had known—" "We both lost," he said quietly. But Regina, we found each other again, and we have Azalea. That beautiful, amazing little girl who somehow managed to find me on a street corner and bring us back together. Regina looked at the ring box sitting between them, a symbol of all the might-have-beens that had been stolen from them. What happens now? Now we figure out how to be a family, Kirk said simply. If you'll let me. If you think you can trust me with both your hearts. Kirk, you're engaged to Calliope now. The papers, the announcement, is being retracted as we speak, Kirk interrupted. I called off the engagement the morning after I saw you. I couldn't go through with marrying someone else when my heart belongs to you. It always has. Regina closed her eyes, feeling the last of her carefully constructed walls crumbling around her. This is terrifying. I know, Kirk said, reaching across the table to cover her hands with his. But Regina, some things are worth being terrified for. Our daughter is worth it. What we had, what we could have again, is worth it. When Regina opened her eyes, she found Kirk watching her with the same intensity that had first drawn her to him all those years ago. But now there was something else there too. Maturity, wisdom earned through loss, the quiet strength of a man who had learned what truly mattered. I need time, she said finally, and we need to think about Azalea. How do we explain this to her? How do we help her understand? Together, Kirk said without hesitation. We figure it out together. As they sat in the small cafe, talking about their daughter and their fears and the tentative possibility of a future together, Regina felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years. Hope. It was fragile and frightening, but it was real. And for the first time since she'd walked away from Kirk's hotel room all those years ago, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough after all. But as they prepared to leave, as Kirk helped her with her coat and their fingers brushed in a touch that sent electricity through her entire body, Regina realized that the hardest part wasn't behind them. The hardest part was learning to trust again, to open her heart again, to believe that this time their love would be strong enough to survive whatever storms might come. Outside the cafe, as the late afternoon sun painted the city in shades of gold and amber, Kirk and Regina stood on the sidewalk, their breath visible in the crisp air, and for the first time in 10 years, they looked toward the future together. Chapter 4. Second chances. Love doesn't always return with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives as quiet acts of kindness, anonymous gestures that speak louder than words ever could. 6 weeks had passed since the cafe conversation that had rewritten Regina's understanding of the past, and she was learning that rebuilding trust was like teaching her heart to hope again. Each beat forward felt both essential and terrifying. Kirk had kept his word about giving her space. He hadn't pushed for more meetings or demanded immediate access to Azalea. Instead, he'd begun what Regina could only describe as a careful courtship of both mother and daughter, so subtle she almost missed the pattern. It started with the art collector who purchased 3 of her most expensive paintings in a single day, paying premium prices without negotiation. Then, Azalea's school received an anonymous donation that fully funded their struggling art program for the next 3 years. The gallery's ancient heating system was mysteriously repaired by a contractor who insisted payment had already been arranged. Each act was executed with such discretion that Regina might have missed the connection entirely, if not for the elegant signature on the donation check, a flowing K that she recognized from love letters written a lifetime ago. "Mommy, look what I made in art class today!" Azalea burst through the gallery door like a small hurricane, her backpack sliding off one shoulder as she rushed to show Regina her latest masterpiece. The painting was unmistakably the work of an 8-year-old, bold colors applied with enthusiastic brush strokes, proportions that existed only in the realm of childhood imagination. But what stopped Regina's breath was the subject matter. A family of 3 standing in front of a house, a man with dark hair, a woman with brown skin, and a little girl with curls, all holding hands under a rainbow. "It's beautiful, baby girl," Regina managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell me about it." "It's us," Azalea said matter-of-factly. "You, me, and Daddy." Regina's heart nearly stopped. "Daddy?" The sad Mr. Kirk. Azalea's golden eyes sparkled with the innocent certainty of childhood. "He is my daddy, isn't he?" "I've been thinking about it, and it makes sense. He has the same eyes as me, and when he looks at me, he gets the same happy, sad face that Grandma Estelle gets when she talks about Grandpa Harold." Sometimes Regina forgot how perceptive her daughter was, how those wise eyes missed nothing. "What makes you think that?" "Lots of things," Azalea said, settling onto her favorite stool. "Like how you both get all nervous and fluttery when you see each other, and how he knew exactly how I like my hot chocolate even though I never told him. And how when I drew this picture it felt right in my heart." Regina stared at her daughter, marveling at the child's intuitive understanding of truths that adults spent years trying to rationalize. "How do you feel about that? About Kirk being your daddy?" Azalea considered this with the seriousness she applied to all important questions. "Happy," she said finally, "but also scared. What if he decides he doesn't want to be my daddy after he gets to know me better? What if I'm too much trouble?" The vulnerability in her daughter's voice broke Regina's heart. She pulled Azalea into her arms, breathing in the familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "Oh, sweetheart, you could never be too much trouble. And any man who gets the privilege of being your daddy would be the luckiest man in the world. Do you think he wants to meet me? Like, really meet me? As his daughter?" Before Regina could answer, the gallery door chimed. They both turned to see Kirk standing in the doorway, and Regina's breath caught at the sight of him. Gone was the perfectly polished businessman she remembered. This Kirk wore jeans and a simple grey sweater, his hair slightly mussed by the April wind. He looked younger, more approachable, and absolutely terrified. "Kirk!" Azalea hopped off the stool, her painting clutched in her hands. "Perfect timing! I just finished my family portrait." "Want to see?" Kirk's eyes found Regina's over their daughter's head, silently asking permission. Regina nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs as Azalea proudly displayed her artwork. "It's us," Azalea announced. "Mommy, me, and you, because you're my daddy, right?" The silence that followed was profound. Kirk knelt down to Azalea's level, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch the painting. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I'm your daddy, and this is the most beautiful painting I've ever seen." Azalea beamed. "Really? Even more beautiful than the ones in Mommy's gallery?" "Much more beautiful," Kirk confirmed, tears threatening to spill over. "Because it shows the most important thing in the world, family." "Does this mean we can have hot chocolate together now? And maybe you could read me a bedtime story sometime? Mommy does all the voices, but I bet you'd be good at it too." Kirk looked to Regina, hope and desperation warring in his expression. She found herself nodding before her logical mind could interfere. "I think that could be arranged," she said softly. The next hour passed in a blur of careful conversation and tentative bonding. Kirk listened with rapt attention as Azalea chattered about school and friends and her latest art projects. He asked thoughtful questions and laughed at her silly jokes, and Regina watched in amazement as father and daughter began to weave the first fragile threads of their relationship. When Azalea excused herself to wash paint off her hands, Kirk turned to Regina with wonder written across his face. "She's incredible," he said. "Regina, how did you manage to raise someone so perfect?" "She's not perfect," Regina corrected with a small smile. She's stubborn and dramatic, and she has a tendency to reorganize other people's belongings when she thinks she knows better. But she's everything good about both of us. I want to know everything, Kirk said urgently. Her first word, her first steps, what she was like as a baby. I want to see photos and hear stories and... He stopped, looking stricken. I'm sorry. I have no right to demand anything. It's just... I've missed so much. We have time, Regina said gently. All the time in the world to share those memories. Do we? Kirk's blue eyes searched her face. Regina, I need you to know that I'm not just here for Azalea. Yes, I want to be her father more than I've ever wanted anything in my life, but I also want to try again. With you. With us. Regina's breath caught. Kirk, I know I hurt you. I know I chose my company over our relationship, chose success over love. But Regina, I've spent 10 years learning that all the money and power in the world means nothing without someone to share it with. Without you. We're different people now, Regina said quietly. We've both been through so much, changed so much. What if we try and it doesn't work? What if we hurt each other again? What about Azalea? Then we'll figure it out, Kirk said simply. Together. Regina, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or move in with me next week. I'm asking for a chance to court you properly this time. To show you that I've learned what really matters. To prove that I can be the man you deserve and the father Azalea needs. Before Regina could respond, Azalea bounded back into the room, her hands clean and her face bright with excitement. Are you staying for dinner? She asked Kirk hopefully. Mommy's making spaghetti, and it's the best in the whole world. We could eat it and then maybe watch a movie. I promise to pick something that's not too princessy. Kirk looked at Regina questioningly. She saw the hope in his eyes, the careful restraint that held back years of longing, and felt something shift in her chest. Maybe Mirabelle was right. Maybe it was time to be brave. Stay, she said simply. Stay for dinner. The smile that spread across Kirk's face was like sunrise after the longest night, and as Azalea clapped her hands in delight, Regina allowed herself to believe that perhaps some stories deserved a second chapter after all. As they walked to Regina's small apartment above the gallery, Azalea chattering excitedly between them about her plans for the evening, Regina felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the warm flutter of possibility, not the desperate passion of their youth, but something deeper, more sustainable, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from the ashes of their past. The evening passed in a blur of domestic bliss that felt both foreign and perfectly natural. Kirk proved surprisingly adept at following Azalea's complicated spaghetti-eating rules, which involved creating towers with the noodles and making sound effects for the sauce. He sat through 2 episodes of her favorite cartoon without complaint, and when she fell asleep, curled between them on the couch, he carefully carried her to her bed with the tenderness of a man discovering fatherhood for the first time. Thank you, he said quietly as they stood in Azalea's doorway, watching their daughter sleep. For letting me stay, for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it. Maybe it's not about deserving, Regina replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe it's about choosing to believe in second chances. As Kirk left that night, pressing a gentle kiss to Regina's forehead that felt like both a promise and a prayer, she stood in her doorway and watched him disappear into the night. For the first time in 10 years, she went to sleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. Chapter 5. The Dance of Hearts. True intimacy isn't found in perfect choreography, but in the moment 2 people remember how to move together despite all the time and pain that has passed between them. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with elegant gold lettering, the annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala. Regina had attended the event every year since opening her gallery, donating pieces for the silent auction and networking with potential collectors. This year felt different, not because of the cause, which remained dear to her heart, but because of the handwritten note attached in Kirk's distinctive script. "Would you honor me with your presence as my guest? I'd like the chance to show you off properly this time. K." Regina had stared at those words for 20 minutes, her fingers tracing the elegant curves of his handwriting. Show her off, as if she were something precious, something to be proud of. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Now, standing before her bedroom mirror, in a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves like liquid silk, Regina questioned every decision that had led to this moment. The dress was new, purchased in a moment of reckless hope from a boutique she normally couldn't afford. The salesgirl had insisted the rich color made her skin glow, transforming her from a struggling gallery owner into someone who belonged in Kirk's rarefied world. But did she? Did she really belong there, or was she setting herself up for another devastating fall? "Mommy, you look like a princess," Azalea gasped from the doorway, resplendent in her favorite pajamas with tiny paintbrushes printed on them. "Thank you, baby girl," Regina said, adjusting her earrings with nervous fingers. The simple diamond studs had been her mother's, one of the few things she'd kept when she'd sold everything else to start over. "You're sure you're okay staying with Aunt Belle tonight?" "Are you kidding? She promised to let me reorganize her jewelry collection and teach me how to make crème brûlée." Azalea bounded into the room and hugged Regina tightly, her small arms wrapping around Regina's waist with fierce affection. "Have fun dancing with Daddy." The casual way Azalea had begun referring to Kirk as Daddy still took Regina's breath away. Over the past month, their daughter had embraced Kirk's presence in their lives with the wholehearted acceptance that only children possessed. She'd dragged him to parent-teacher conferences, insisted he judge her fashion shows, and somehow convinced him to learn how to braid hair despite his complete lack of experience. Watching them together, seeing the wonder in Kirk's eyes every time he looked at their daughter, Regina felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling a little more each day. The doorbell rang, and Regina's stomach fluttered with anticipation. Through the window, she could see a sleek black car waiting at the curb, but it was the man standing at her door who made her pulse race. Kirk looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression in his eyes when he saw her that took her breath away. Pure, undisguised wonder mixed with something deeper, hungrier. "Regina," he breathed, and she heard her name like a prayer on his lips. You're absolutely stunning." Heat rose in her cheeks, spreading down her neck and across her chest. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see straight through her careful composure to the woman beneath who still ached for his touch. "Thank you," she managed, her voice huskier than intended. "You clean up pretty well yourself." "Daddy, you look like James Bond," Azalea announced, appearing at Regina's side with her usual perfect timing. "Are you going to dance with Mommy? She's a really good dancer. She taught me the waltz last week." "Did she now?" Kirk's eyes sparkled with amusement, but Regina caught the heat that flashed through them when his gaze lingered on her exposed shoulders. "Then I'm in for a treat." The drive to the hotel passed in comfortable conversation about Azalea's latest art project and Kirk's ongoing efforts to learn the intricacies of single parenting, but Regina was acutely aware of the tension humming between them. Every time Kirk's hand moved near the gear shift, she found herself wondering what it would feel like to have those fingers touch her skin again. Every time he laughed at something she said, she remembered the way that sound used to vibrate through her chest when they lay tangled together in bed. "Stop," she told herself firmly. This is dangerous territory. But as they pulled up to the Grand Hotel entrance, as Kirk came around to open her door and offered his arm with old-world gallantry, Regina felt herself slipping into the fantasy. For one night, she could pretend they were just a couple in love, preparing to dance the night away without the weight of their complicated history hanging over them. The ballroom was a vision of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in white silk, while a string quartet played softly in one corner. Regina had been to dozens of similar events, but arriving on Kirk's arm felt like stepping into a fairy tale. She noticed the way heads turned as they entered, the whispered conversations and curious glances. Some were admiring, some speculative, but all recognized the power couple they appeared to be. "Nervous?" Kirk murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. "Should I be?" she replied, trying for levity, but hearing the tremor in her own voice. "Never. You're the most beautiful woman in this room, and everyone here is going to know it." Before Regina could respond to the raw sincerity in his voice, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps and a voice that made her blood run cold. "Kirk, there you are, darling." The voice was crisp, cultured, and carried the unmistakable chill of barely controlled fury. Regina turned to see a woman approaching them with predatory grace, tall, blonde, and beautiful in the way that money could buy and maintain. Calliope Winters looked exactly like what she was: old money, careful breeding, and a lifetime of getting exactly what she wanted. "Calliope," Kirk's voice was carefully neutral, but Regina felt his hand tighten on her arm, protective and possessive. "I didn't realize you'd be here tonight." "Well, I couldn't miss the opportunity to support such a worthy cause," Calliope replied, her pale blue eyes fixed on Regina with calculating assessment. "And you must be Regina Wilson. I've heard so much about you." The words were perfectly polite, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes, but Regina heard the threat underneath them. This was the woman who had destroyed their relationship with a single phone call, who had stolen 10 years of happiness with carefully crafted lies. Seeing her in person, Regina was struck by how cold she was, how everything about her seemed calculated for maximum effect rather than genuine warmth. "Ms. Winters," Regina replied evenly, drawing on every ounce of poise she possessed. "How nice to finally meet you." "Yes, isn't it?" Calliope's smile was sharp as a blade, all teeth and no warmth. "Kirk has told me all about your reunion. How wonderful that you two have reconnected after all these years. Though I must say I'm surprised you felt comfortable coming tonight. These events can be so overwhelming for people who aren't accustomed to this level of society." The insult was delivered with surgical precision, designed to make Regina feel small and out of place. Regina felt Kirk tense beside her, his body coiling as if preparing to strike, but before he could speak, Regina smiled with perfect grace. "You're absolutely right," she said smoothly, her voice carrying just enough honey to mask the steel beneath. "It's fortunate that my gallery work has given me experience with discerning collectors. It makes it so much easier to distinguish between genuine class and mere pretension." The shot hit its mark. Calliope's carefully maintained composure flickered for just a moment, her eyes flashing with something ugly before the mask slipped back into place. "How quaint," Calliope managed. But before she could rally for another attack, the evening's host announced that dinner was being served. Kirk guided Regina away from the confrontation, his hand warm and steady against her back, fingers splayed possessively across the exposed skin above her dress's neckline. "I'm sorry about that," he murmured as they found their table, his breath warm against her ear. "Calliope doesn't handle rejection well. She's the one who called me, isn't she?" 10 years ago. Kirk nodded grimly, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. I had Caspian investigate after our conversation. She was dating Hadrian at the time, and they were both threatened by my success. Destroying my personal life was just another business move to them. Regina absorbed this information, feeling a mix of vindication and sorrow for the years they'd lost, but also, surprisingly, a surge of fierce protectiveness for what they were building now. I can handle Calliope Winters, Kirk. I've dealt with difficult people before. I know you can, Kirk said, and the admiration in his voice made her pulse quicken. But you shouldn't have to. You deserve better than her poison. The dinner conversation flowed around them. Talk of market trends and charity initiatives, the comfortable chatter of people accustomed to wealth and influence. Regina found herself holding her own admirably, her natural intelligence and artistic insights earning respectful nods from their table mates. She noticed Kirk watching her with unconcealed pride, and every time their eyes met across the table, she felt that familiar flutter of awareness that had nothing to do with the wine and everything to do with the man sitting beside her. When the orchestra began the evening's dancing, Kirk rose and offered her his hand, with a formality that belied the heat in his eyes. "May I have this honor?" Regina placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palms from his recent attempts at home improvement projects for Azalea's room, and allowed him to lead her onto the dance floor. She was acutely aware of the eyes following their movement, of the whispered conversations and speculative glances, but all of that faded away the moment Kirk's arm encircled her waist. He was a wonderful dancer, she remembered now, guiding her through the steps with confident grace that made her feel weightless in his arms. But it was more than technique. It was the way he held her, as if she were something precious and fragile, the way his thumb traced small circles against her palm, the way he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. "Do you remember our first dance?" Kirk asked softly, his breath warm against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Your company Christmas party," Regina replied, her voice catching slightly as memories flooded back. "You were so nervous you stepped on my dress. And you laughed instead of getting angry. That's when I knew I was completely lost." His voice was rough with emotion, and Regina felt herself melting despite her best efforts to maintain distance. The music swirled around them, and Regina closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the familiar rhythm of moving with Kirk. His hand on her waist was gentle but possessive, his fingers intertwined with hers as if he never intended to let her go. She could feel the heat of his body through his tuxedo, could smell his cologne mixed with something uniquely him that made her want to bury her face in his neck and just breathe him in. "This is dangerous," her rational mind whispered. "You're falling again." But as Kirk spun her gently, as she found herself pressed against his chest for a heart-stopping moment before he eased her back into the dance, Regina found she didn't care about danger. She was tired of being careful, tired of protecting herself from feelings that refused to be contained. "Regina," Kirk said quietly, and something in his tone made her look up at him. The expression in his eyes was so intense, so full of love and longing and barely restrained desire that her breath caught in her throat. "I know we're taking this slowly, and I respect that, but I need you to know something." "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "I love you. I never stopped loving you, and I never will. Whatever happens between us, whatever you decide about our future, that will never change." His voice was raw with honesty, vulnerable in a way that the old Kirk would never have allowed himself to be. Regina's throat tightened with emotion. Around them, other couples swayed to the music, lost in their own romantic moments, but all she could see was Kirk, this man who had broken her heart and was now offering it back to her, piece by careful piece. "Kirk," she started, but he shook his head gently. "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting with unshed tears. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that this isn't just about Azalea, though she's the most precious gift you could have given me. This is about us, about the love we had and the love we could have again." The song ended, but they remained standing together in the center of the dance floor, lost in each other's eyes. Regina felt something fundamental shift in her chest, like a door she'd kept locked for 10 years finally creaking open. The fear was still there, but it was overwhelmed now by something stronger: hope, desire, and the bone-deep recognition that this man, for all his flaws, was still the other half of her soul. "I'm scared," she whispered, the admission torn from her heart. "So am I," Kirk admitted, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek with infinite tenderness. "But Regina, some things are worth being scared for." As the evening progressed, Regina found herself seeing Kirk in a new light. He introduced her to business associates with genuine pride, his hand never leaving the small of her back, marking her as his in a way that made her pulse race. He listened attentively when she spoke about her art, asking thoughtful questions that showed he remembered every detail of her dreams and ambitions. When pompous collectors tried to mansplain art theory to her, Kirk smoothly redirected the conversation, giving her space to shine while making it clear that any disrespect toward her would not be tolerated. During the auction, she watched him bid aggressively on a painting by a young local artist, not because he particularly wanted the piece, but because he knew the money would make a difference to the children's hospital, and because he believed in supporting emerging talent the way no one had supported Regina when she was starting out. "That was a beautiful gesture," she said, as he returned to their table after winning the bid. "She reminds me of you," Kirk replied simply. "Young, talented, fearless. Everyone deserves someone to believe in them." The casual way he said it, as if supporting struggling artists was just something he did now, made Regina's heart clench with affection. This was growth, real change, not the grand gestures of their youth, but the quiet consistency of a man who had learned what truly mattered. The night ended with another dance, this one slower and more intimate than the first. The lights had been dimmed, and most of the crowd had thinned out, leaving only the die-hard romantics swaying on the dance floor. Kirk held her closer this time, and Regina allowed herself to melt into his embrace, her cheek pressed against his chest so she could feel the steady thrum of his heartbeat. "Thank you," she said as they swayed together, her voice muffled against his shirt. "For tonight, for everything. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be courted properly." Kirk's arms tightened around her, and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "This is just the beginning, Regina. I intend to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." "The rest of your life?" she asked, pulling back to look at him. "That's a pretty big promise." "It's the only promise that matters," he replied, his blue eyes serious and intent. "I lost you once because I was too proud and too stupid to fight for what we had. I won't make that mistake again." As he walked her to her door later that night, Regina felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years, the intoxicating possibility of a love that could last forever. They stood on her doorstep, neither wanting to break the spell of the evening, the air between them charged with possibility and unspoken desire. "Regina," Kirk said softly, stepping closer until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "May I?" She nodded, unable to speak, and then his lips were on hers, soft at first, tentative, asking permission. But when she responded, when her hands fisted in his lapels and she rose on her toes to deepen the kiss, he groaned against her mouth and gathered her closer. The kiss was everything their first had been and more, passionate, desperate, full of 10 years of longing and regret and hope. Kirk's hands tangled in her hair, careful not to mess up her carefully arranged style, while Regina's fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, marveling at the familiar feel of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kirk rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he were trying to memorize the moment. "I should go," he said, though he made no move to step away. "Yes," Regina agreed, though her hands were still clutching his jacket. "You should." Neither of them moved. "Regina," Kirk said, his voice rough with want. "If I don't leave now—" "I know," she whispered, even as every cell in her body screamed at her to invite him inside, to throw caution to the wind and take what they both so desperately wanted. With visible effort, Kirk stepped back, his hands falling to his sides. "Sweet dreams, Regina." "Good night, Kirk." Standing in her doorway, watching Kirk's car disappear into the night, Regina touched her lips where his kiss still lingered. Her reflection in the hallway mirror showed a woman transformed, eyes bright with unshed tears and newfound hope, lips swollen from kisses, hair slightly mussed despite Kirk's careful handling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face, new walls to tear down. But tonight, for the first time in 10 years, Regina Wilson went to sleep believing in the power of second chances and the enduring strength of true love. Outside her window, the city hummed with its eternal energy. But in her small apartment above the gallery, Regina dreamed of strong arms and gentle kisses, of family dinners and bedtime stories, of a future bright with promise and painted in the colors of hope. And in those dreams she danced. Chapter 6: Storms and Sanctuary. True character reveals itself not in moments of triumph, but when everything we've built threatens to crumble, and sometimes it takes a hurricane to show us where our real home lies. The call came at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, jolting Regina from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in weeks. Kirk's name on her phone screen sent immediate alarm coursing through her veins. He would never call this early unless something was catastrophically wrong. "Regina, I'm sorry to wake you." Kirk's voice was strained, exhausted. "I wouldn't call, but I didn't know who else." "What's wrong?" Regina was already reaching for her robe, her heart pounding. Hadrian Blackwood has made his move. He's been orchestrating a hostile takeover for months, and last night he triggered a cascade of events that could destroy everything. My stock price has plummeted, 3 major contracts have been mysteriously cancelled, and there are rumors circulating that could ruin not just my company, but my reputation. Regina could hear the devastation in his voice, the careful control barely holding back what sounded like panic. "Where are you?" "My office. I've been here all night trying to salvage what I can, but Regina, I think I'm going to lose everything." "I'm coming," Regina said without hesitation. "No, you don't understand. This could get ugly. If you're seen with me right now, it could affect your gallery, your reputation. I won't drag you down with me." "Kirk Lyles," Regina said firmly, already pulling on clothes. "You listen to me very carefully. You are not facing this alone. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The Lyles Industries building looked like a fortress under siege when Regina arrived. News vans lined the street, and she could see reporters camping outside the main entrance. She used the employee parking garage, making her way to Kirk's office through back corridors with the help of Caspian Aldridge, who looked as haggard as his boss. She found Kirk standing at his office windows, staring out at the city that had made him king and was now threatening to dethrone him. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, hair mussed from running his hands through it. He looked like a man watching his world burn. "You shouldn't have come," he said without turning around. "Yes, I should have." Regina crossed to him, her heart breaking at the defeat in his posture. "Kirk, What exactly is happening? He turned then, and she saw the full extent of his exhaustion. Dark circles under his eyes, lines of stress etched deep around his mouth, and a vulnerability that reminded her achingly of the young man she'd fallen in love with. Hadrian has been planning this for years, Kirk said, sinking into his desk chair. He's systematically undermined my key relationships, planted seeds of doubt about my business practices, and now he's used some creative accounting to make it look like I've been embezzling from my own company. But that's not true. Of course it's not true. But the damage is done. My board is calling for an emergency meeting. My investors are panicking, and by the time I can prove my innocence, there might not be a company left to save. Regina studied the man before her, seeing not the powerful billionaire the world knew, but the scared, proud young entrepreneur who had once shared his dreams with her over late-night takeout dinners. "What do you need?" she asked simply. Kirk looked up at her with something like wonder. "Regina, you can't get involved in this. If it comes out that you're connected to me, it could destroy your gallery. The art world doesn't forgive scandal easily. I didn't ask about my gallery. I asked what you need." For a moment, Kirk's carefully maintained composure cracked, and she saw the raw gratitude in his eyes. "I need character witnesses, people who can vouch for my integrity, my business practices. But everyone I thought I could count on has either turned their backs or advised me to distance myself from them to protect their own interests." "Then they were never really your friends," Regina said firmly. "Kirk, you are one of the most honorable men I've ever known. Yes, you made mistakes with us, but those were mistakes of the heart, not of character. You would never steal or cheat or betray the people who trusted you." "How can you be so sure? You said yourself we're different people now." Regina moved to stand beside his chair, her hand finding his shoulder. "Because I've watched you with Azalea. I've seen how you treat the people who work for you, how you bid on artwork to support causes you believe in, how you've tried to make amends for the hurt you caused. The Kirk Lyles I knew 10 years ago was ambitious and sometimes ruthless, but he was never dishonest. And you're still that man, just wiser." The next several hours passed in intense strategic warfare. Regina watched as Kirk transformed from the defeated man she'd found into the strategic genius who had built an empire from nothing. He worked the phones, called in favors, and began methodically dismantling Hadrian's accusations with evidence and documentation. Regina made herself useful where she could, bringing coffee, fielding calls, and offering moral support when the pressure threatened to overwhelm him. But more importantly, she simply stayed. While his fair-weather friends and business associates distanced themselves, she remained by his side, a steady presence in the chaos. The breakthrough came at 3 p.m. when Caspian burst into the office with a tablet in his hands. "Kirk, you need to see this. Our IT team found evidence of a security breach in your personal email account 6 months ago. Someone has been accessing your correspondence and using it to anticipate your business moves." Kirk studied the data, his expression growing darker. "Calliope," he said grimly. "She would have had access to my email passwords from when we were engaged, and she's been working with Hadrian all along." "There's more," Caspian continued. "We traced the breach back to her personal computer. If we can prove she was feeding information to Hadrian, it undermines their entire case against you." For the first time all day, hope flickered in Kirk's eyes. "Can we prove it in court?" "With the right legal team, absolutely." Regina watched as Kirk slowly straightened in his chair, the fighter in him emerging from the ashes of despair. "Then let's prove it. Caspian, get me Marcus Chen on the phone. If anyone can untangle this mess, it's him." The next several hours were a masterclass in corporate warfare. Kirk and his team worked tirelessly to compile evidence, build their case, and prepare for the legal battle ahead. Regina marveled at his resilience, his ability to find hope in the darkest moments and fight back when everything seemed lost. As evening fell and the immediate crisis stabilized, Kirk finally allowed himself to collapse back in his chair. "We're not out of danger yet," he said tiredly. "This could take months to resolve, and the damage to my reputation might be permanent." "But you'll survive it," Regina said with quiet certainty. "You'll rebuild, just like you did before." Kirk looked at her with something approaching awe. "Why did you stay?" "Regina, you could have walked away today, protected yourself and Azalea from this mess. Why did you put yourself at risk for me?" Regina considered the question, thinking about the scared young woman who had fled his hotel room 10 years ago, and the woman she had become, stronger, wiser, more certain of her own worth. "Because this is what partners do," she said simply. "They stand together when the storms come. And Kirk, I've spent 10 years punishing both of us for mistakes that were based on lies and misunderstandings. I won't make that mistake again." Kirk rose from his chair and crossed to her, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "I love you," he said quietly. "Regina, I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling like both a confession and a promise. "I never stopped, even when I thought I hated you." When he kissed her, it was with the desperation of a man who had almost lost everything, and the reverence of someone who had been given an unexpected second chance. Regina melted into his embrace, feeling the last of her defenses crumble. They were interrupted by Azalea's voice echoing from the outer office. "Daddy? Mommy? Aunt Belle said you were having a hard day, so I made you cookies." Regina and Kirk broke apart, smiling through their tears as their daughter appeared in the doorway carrying a plate of slightly lopsided chocolate chip cookies, her face bright with concern and love. "We brought dinner too," Mirabelle announced, appearing behind Azalea with bags of takeout. "Figured you could use some real food instead of whatever coffee and stress you've been surviving on." As they sat around Kirk's conference table eating Chinese food and Azalea's cookies, Regina looked around at this unlikely family, scarred by the past but committed to building something beautiful from the pieces. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in years, she felt truly safe. Not because the future was certain, but because they would face it together. Chapter 7. Truth Unveiled. The most profound truths are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge and transform everything we thought we knew about love, loss, and the intricate beauty of belonging. Regina knew the moment had arrived when she found Azalea sitting quietly in her room, staring at the family photo Kirk had given her. A candid shot from their dinner together the week before. All three of them laughing at something silly Azalea had said. Her daughter's usual boundless energy was replaced by an unusual pensiveness that made Regina's maternal instincts flare with concern. "Baby girl, what's got you thinking so hard?" Regina asked, settling on the edge of Azalea's bed. Azalea looked up with those golden eyes that were so eerily reminiscent of Kirk's, not in color, but in their depth and intelligence. "Mommy, why don't I have any pictures of my daddy from when I was little?" The question Regina had been dreading for 8 years hung in the air between them. She'd practiced this conversation countless times, imagining different scenarios and age-appropriate explanations. But none of her rehearsals had prepared her for the quiet wisdom in her daughter's voice. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" "Well," Azalea said with the logical precision of childhood, "my friend Emma has pictures of her daddy holding her when she was a baby, and pictures from all her birthdays, and even a video of him crying when she was born. But we don't have any pictures like that." Regina's throat tightened. "Sometimes families are complicated, baby. Sometimes daddies and mommies aren't together when babies are born." "But did Daddy know about me? When I was in your tummy? Did he know?" The direct question pierced through all of Regina's careful deflections. Azalea had inherited Kirk's ability to cut straight to the heart of matters, and lying to those perceptive eyes felt like a betrayal of everything Regina had tried to teach her about honesty and trust. "No," Regina whispered. "He didn't know." Azalea absorbed this information with surprising calm, her small fingers tracing the edges of the photograph. "Why didn't you tell him?" Before Regina could formulate an answer, the doorbell rang. Through the window, she could see Kirk's familiar silhouette, and her heart began to race. They'd been spending more time together as a family over the past month, building tentative bridges and learning to navigate their new dynamic. But this conversation felt too big, too important to share with someone who was still, technically, on the outside of their tight circle of two. "That's Daddy," Azalea observed unnecessarily. "Can we ask him?" "Ask him what?" "Why you didn't tell him about me. I think he deserves to know the truth too, don't you?" Sometimes Regina marveled at the emotional intelligence her 8-year-old possessed. Azalea seemed to understand instinctively that secrets were like wounds. They festered in darkness but could heal in the light of truth. "Okay," Regina said, her voice barely steady, "but baby girl, this is a very grown-up conversation. There might be sad parts." "I can handle sad parts, Mummy. I'm not a little kid anymore." Regina opened the door to find Kirk holding a bag of groceries and wearing the slightly anxious expression he got whenever he wasn't sure if his presence was welcome. The past month had been a delicate dance of rebuilding trust and establishing boundaries, and while progress had been made, they were all still learning the steps. "I brought ingredients for pancakes," he said hopefully. "I thought maybe we could have breakfast for dinner. I know it's Azalea's favorite." "Daddy!" Azalea appeared at Regina's side, taking Kirk's free hand with the easy affection that had developed between them. "Perfect timing. We need to have a family meeting." Kirk's eyebrows rose. "A family meeting?" "About truth," Azalea said solemnly. "Mommy and I were talking about why you didn't know about me when I was little, and I think we should all talk about it together. Because that's what families do. They tell each other the truth, even when it's hard." Regina watched Kirk's face cycle through surprise, apprehension, and finally, a deep kind of gratitude that their daughter wanted to include him in something so important. She saw his hands tremble slightly as he set down the groceries, the weight of this moment clearly hitting him. "Of course," he said quietly. "Truth is always important." They settled in the living room. Azalea curled between her parents on the couch with the unconscious ease of a child who finally felt complete. Regina took a shaky breath, knowing that whatever she said next would fundamentally change their family dynamic forever. "Azalea asked me why I didn't tell you about her when I was pregnant," Regina began, her voice carefully controlled. "And the answer is complicated." Kirk's hand found hers, squeezing gently in encouragement. "Take your time. When we broke up 10 years ago, it was because I thought you had chosen someone else. I received a phone call from someone claiming to be your assistant, telling me that you were serious about Calliope Winters and that I should stop trying to contact you." "But Mommy," Azalea interrupted with a frown, "didn't you want to make sure? If you loved Daddy, wouldn't you want to hear it from him?" The question was innocent, but devastating. Regina felt the shame of her younger self's pride and insecurity wash over her. "I should have," Regina admitted, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "But I was scared and hurt, and when I found out I was pregnant a few weeks later, I convinced myself that you had moved on and wouldn't want to be burdened with a baby." Kirk's intake of breath was sharp and pained. "Regina, I was wrong," Regina continued, tears flowing freely now. "I was so wrong, and I've regretted it every single day for 8 years. By the time I realized I should have fought for us, too much time had passed. I didn't know how to undo the damage I'd done." Azalea was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. She reached out and touched her mother's face, wiping away a tear with her small finger. "You were protecting me," she said, with startling insight. "Like mama birds protect their babies when they're scared." Finally, she looked at Kirk with concern. "Are you sad that you missed my baby years?" Kirk's composure cracked completely. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, his voice breaking as he pulled their daughter into his arms. "I'm devastated that I missed them. I would have loved to hold you when you were tiny, to hear your first word, to see you take your first steps. Missing those moments is the biggest regret of my life. But you're here now," Azalea said with the profound simplicity of childhood wisdom, "and we can make new memories, better ones." Kirk buried his face in her curls, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Regina watched as this powerful man who commanded boardrooms and built empires was reduced to tears by the forgiveness of an 8-year-old. "Are you angry with Mommy?" Azalea asked quietly, pulling back to look at Kirk's face. "For not telling you about me?" Kirk looked at Regina over their daughter's head, and she saw years of pain and loss in his eyes, but also understanding and something that might have been forgiveness. "I'm sad," he said honestly. "I'm sad that we all missed out on so much time together. But Azalea, your mommy did what she thought was best for you. She raised you to be the most amazing little girl in the world, and I could never be angry about that." "Does this mean we're a real family now?" Azalea asked with hope threading through her voice. "Like, officially?" Regina and Kirk exchanged a look over their daughter's head, a moment of silent communication that spoke to the possibility of a future neither had dared to imagine just months before. "We're already a real family," Kirk said softly, his voice still thick with emotion. "We have been from the moment you were born, even if I didn't know it yet. The love was always there, Azalea. Sometimes it just takes time for love to find its way home." Azalea beamed and threw her arms around both parents, pulling them into a three-way hug that felt like coming home. "I love you both so much," she whispered. As they sat together on the couch, Azalea safely ensconced between her parents, Regina felt a peace she hadn't experienced in 10 years. The truth was finally out in the open, messy and painful, but ultimately healing. They had a long way to go, bridges to rebuild and trust to restore, but for the first time since that devastating morning when she'd awakened alone, Regina allowed herself to believe that some love stories were strong enough to survive even the deepest wounds. "Can we make those pancakes now?" Azalea asked, practical as always. "Truth-telling makes me hungry." As laughter filled the small living room, Regina watched Kirk's face light up with joy and realized that sometimes the greatest gifts came disguised as endings, because only when something is truly over can something new and beautiful begin. "And Daddy," Azalea added with the serious tone she used for important announcements, "next time we have pancakes, you have to tell me stories about when you were little. I want to know everything about my family." Kirk's eyes met Regina's over their daughter's head, both of them understanding that this was just the beginning of their journey back to each other. Chapter 8. Building Bridges. Love is not a destination but a journey, one that requires patience, forgiveness, and the courage to believe that broken hearts can not only heal but become stronger where they once fractured. 3 months after the truth had been unveiled, Regina found herself standing in the doorway of Azalea's bedroom, watching a scene that still took her breath away with its simple perfection. Kirk sat on the edge of their daughter's bed, his deep voice weaving magic as he read from a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden, complete with different voices for each character. Azalea lay curled against his side, her eyes heavy with sleep, but fighting to hear the end of the chapter. "And tomorrow," Kirk read in his version of Yorkshire dialect, We'll work in the garden and make it the most beautiful place in all the world. Just like we're doing with our family, Azalea murmured sleepily, making it beautiful. Regina's heart clenched at the innocence and wisdom in those words. Over the past months, they had indeed been cultivating something beautiful, not rushing to recreate what they'd lost, but carefully nurturing something entirely new. Kirk had proven himself to be everything Regina could have hoped for in a father. He attended every school event, helped with homework, and had somehow managed to braid Azalea's hair into something that almost resembled the tutorial videos he'd been secretly watching on YouTube. More importantly, he listened to their daughter with the same intensity he brought to boardroom negotiations, treating her opinions and feelings with the respect they deserved. But it was the way he courted Regina that truly took her breath away. This wasn't the impulsive passion of their youth, but something deeper, more mature. He brought her coffee from her favorite cafe, remembered details about her work that she'd mentioned in passing, and had somehow arranged for her gallery to be featured in several prominent art publications. Most precious of all, he gave her space, understanding that trust, once broken, required time and consistency to rebuild. "Is Mommy going to read too?" Azalea asked, spotting Regina in the doorway. "If she'd like to," Kirk said, his eyes finding Regina's with a warmth that still made her pulse race. "Though I think someone is too sleepy for more stories tonight." As if to prove him wrong, Azalea sat up straighter. "I'm not sleepy. Can we talk about the wedding?" Regina's breath caught. Kirk and she hadn't discussed marriage. They were still navigating the delicate balance of co-parenting and rekindling their relationship, taking things one careful step at a time. "What wedding, baby girl?" Regina asked, settling on the other side of Azalea's bed. "Yours and Daddy's, obviously," Azalea said, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone stating the obvious. "Emma's parents got married last month, and she got to throw flower petals and wear a special dress. I've been thinking about it, and I have some very important suggestions." Kirk and Regina exchanged a look over their daughter's head, part amusement, part terror at being managed by an 8-year-old with strong opinions about their romantic future. "Sweetheart," Regina said carefully, "Daddy and I aren't engaged yet," Azalea finished confidently. "I know, but you will be. I can see it in the way you look at each other when you think I'm not watching." Kirk cleared his throat. "Azalea, grown-up relationships are complicated." "Not really," their daughter interrupted with breezy confidence. "You love each other, we're already a family, and Daddy makes you smile the way you used to smile at old pictures of Grandpa Harold. Plus, I heard Aunt Belle tell Mrs. Chen from next door that you two are obviously meant to be, and that she's never seen Regina glow like this." Regina felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You were eavesdropping." "I was getting a snack," Azalea corrected primly. "It's not my fault adults talk about important things when they think kids aren't listening." Kirk was trying hard not to laugh, Regina could tell. The dimple in his left cheek, the one Azalea had inherited, was fighting to appear. "Well," he said solemnly, "if we were to get married someday, what suggestions would you have?" Azalea's face lit up like Christmas morning. "First, it has to be in a garden because those are the most beautiful places. Second, I get to help pick Mommy's dress because I have excellent taste. Third, there have to be lots of flowers but not too many because some people are allergic. And fourth, we have to promise to always tell each other the truth, even when it's scary." The last condition was delivered with such earnest sincerity that Regina felt her throat tighten with emotion. Their daughter had learned the importance of honesty the hard way, and she wasn't about to let her parents forget it. "Those are very wise suggestions," Kirk said quietly. "What else? Can I have a baby brother or sister someday?" I've been the only kid for 8 years and it gets lonely sometimes." Regina's face went from warm to blazing. Kirk's hand found hers automatically, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "That's definitely a conversation for another time," Regina managed. "Right now, how about we focus on getting one little girl to sleep?" After Azalea had finally succumbed to exhaustion, Kirk and Regina found themselves on the small balcony off Regina's bedroom, sharing a bottle of wine and the comfortable intimacy of two people learning to be vulnerable with each other again. "She's terrifying," Kirk said with fond admiration. "Our daughter is going to rule the world someday." "She gets that confidence from you," Regina replied, curling up in the chair beside his. "The way she just assumes things will work out the way she wants them to." "Is that such a bad thing?" Kirk asked quietly. "Believing that love can win?" Regina studied his profile in the moonlight, noting the lines around his eyes that spoke of the struggles he'd faced, the silver threading through his dark hair that made him even more handsome than the young man she'd first fallen for. "No," she said finally, "it's not a bad thing. But Kirk, I need you to understand something. I can't go through losing you again. If we do this, if we really try to build something permanent, I need to know that you're all in, not just for Azalea, but for us." Kirk turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Regina, I have been all in since the moment I saw you on that street corner 3 months ago. Hell, I've been all in since the night I bought that ring 10 years ago. The question is, are you ready to trust me with both your hearts?" The question hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Regina thought about the scared young woman who had fled rather than fight for their love, and the woman she had become, stronger, wiser, but also more aware of how precious and fragile happiness could be. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I'm ready to try." Kirk's smile was radiant. "Then we take it one day at a time, one conversation, one shared meal, one bedtime story at a time, until trying becomes living and living becomes forever." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the same one he'd shown her months ago, but newer, more elegant. "Kirk, I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. But I wanted you to see this, to know that I'm serious about our future. When the time is right, when you're ready, when Azalea has finished planning every detail of our hypothetical wedding, I'll ask you properly, with flowers and speeches and all the romance you deserve." Regina stared at the box, her heart pounding. "Can I see it?" Inside was the most beautiful ring she'd ever seen. A vintage setting with a perfect diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the moonlight like captured stars. "It belonged to my grandmother," Kirk said softly. "The only woman who ever loved me unconditionally before you and Azalea came into my life. She always said it was waiting for the right woman, someone who would understand that real love isn't about perfection, it's about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard." Regina's eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful." "So are you," Kirk said simply. "And so is this. Whatever this is that we're building together. I know we can't go back to what we were, Regina, but what we're becoming. I think it's going to be even better." As they sat together under the stars, talking quietly about dreams and fears and the 1,000 small details that would shape their future, Regina felt something settle into place in her chest. Not the desperate passion of youth, but something deeper and more enduring, the quiet certainty of a love that had been tested by time and loss and had emerged stronger than before. They were building bridges between past and future, between hurt and healing, between the people they had been and the family they were becoming. And for the first time in 10 years, Regina was brave enough to believe that some bridges were strong enough to last a lifetime. Chapter 9. The Greatest Battle. Sometimes the greatest victories require the greatest sacrifices, and the strongest love is forged not in moments of peace, but in the crucible of defending everything that truly matters. Regina should have known that happiness this profound would come with a price. She should have remembered that men like Hadrian Blackwood didn't simply disappear after their initial plans failed. They regrouped, strategized, and returned with vengeance that made their first assault seem like a gentle warning. The attack came on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Azalea was at school, Kirk was at the office rebuilding his company's reputation, and Regina was at her gallery preparing for an important exhibition. The normalcy of it all made what happened next feel like a violent intrusion into the peaceful life they'd been carefully constructing. Mirabelle burst through the gallery door with her phone clutched in her hand and panic written across her usually composed features. "Regina, darling, you need to see this," she said breathlessly, thrusting the phone forward. "It's all over the news sites, the art blogs everywhere." The headline made Regina's blood run cold. Billionaire Kirk Lyle's secret love child, artist Regina Wilson's decade of deception. Below it was a photo that made her stomach drop. Herself, Kirk, and Azalea leaving a restaurant together the week before, looking every inch the happy family they were becoming. But the article twisted their joy into something sordid and calculating. With trembling fingers, Regina scrolled through the piece, watching as a malicious narrator painted her as a gold-digging opportunist who had hidden Kirk's daughter for years before revealing her existence to trap a wealthy man. It described Azalea as a meal ticket and suggested that Regina had deliberately concealed the child to maximize her eventual payout. This is... Regina's voice failed her as she read her character being systematically destroyed. "Lies," Mirabelle finished fiercely. "Vicious, coordinated lies. But darling, they're everywhere. Someone has been very thorough in their character assassination." Regina's phone began ringing. Reporters, she realized with growing horror. Her sanctuary, her carefully built world of art and beauty and peace, was about to become a circus. The second wave of the attack came an hour later. Caspian Aldridge arrived at the gallery looking grim, with legal documents that made Regina's hands shake as she read them. "Hadrian Blackwood has filed for emergency custody of Azalea," Caspian explained, his usual calm demeanor strained. "He's claiming that Regina is an unfit mother who has used the child as a weapon against Kirk, and that Azalea would be better served in Kirk's sole custody." "But Kirk would never—" "Kirk doesn't know yet," Caspian interrupted. "He's in back-to-back meetings trying to contain the media fallout. Hadrian timed this perfectly, when Kirk would be least available to respond immediately." Regina felt the walls closing in around her. On what grounds could Hadrian possibly claim custody? He's not family. He has no legal standing. He's claiming to represent Azalea's best interests as a concerned citizen who believes the child is being exploited. It's thin, but it's enough to force a court hearing. And Regina... Caspian's expression grew darker. "There's more." The third document made Regina's knees buckle. Hadrian was also filing complaints with Child Protective Services, alleging that Regina had deliberately deprived Azalea of her father for financial gain, and that she was now using the child to manipulate Kirk for money. "They'll want to interview Azalea," Caspian said gently. "They'll want to investigate your home, your finances, your fitness as a mother. Regina, this is a full-scale assault designed to tear your family apart." Regina sank onto her stool behind the counter, the gallery suddenly feeling like a flimsy shelter in a hurricane. Everything she'd built, everything she'd worked for, everything she loved was under attack from a man whose hatred for Kirk was so consuming that he was willing to destroy an innocent child to achieve his revenge. "What do I do?" she whispered, feeling more helpless than she had since the day she'd discovered she was pregnant and alone. Before Caspian could answer, the gallery door burst open again. This time it was Kirk, his hair disheveled and his face a mask of fury unlike anything Regina had ever seen. "Where is she?" he demanded, his eyes scanning the gallery until they found Regina. In 3 strides he was beside her, pulling her into his arms with desperate relief. "Thank God you're here. When I couldn't reach you, I thought—" "Kirk," Regina said shakily. "Azalea. We have to get to Azalea." "Already taken care of," Kirk said grimly. "I've pulled her out of school temporarily and she's with my security team at a safe location. Regina, I am so sorry. This is my fault. My war with Hadrian has put you both in danger." "This isn't about your war anymore," Regina said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "This is about our family, our daughter, and I won't let him destroy us." Kirk's eyes widened at the fierce determination in her voice. "Regina, no!" she interrupted, standing straighter as something crystallized inside her. "I ran once before when faced with a fight for what I loved. I was young and scared, and I let pride cost us 10 years. I won't make that mistake again." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of strategy sessions, legal consultations, and careful planning. Kirk's entire legal team mobilized, but it was Regina who surprised everyone with her tactical thinking and steel-spined determination to protect her daughter. "We fight this on every front," she declared during an emergency meeting in Kirk's office. "Media, legal, and personal. Hadrian wants to paint me as a gold digger? Fine. Let's give them the real story. A young woman who thought she was protecting her unborn child, who built a life and career through her own talent and determination, who raised a daughter to be confident and loved and secure." "Regina," Kirk said admiringly, "you're magnificent when you're angry." "I'm not angry," Regina corrected, her golden eyes blazing with purpose. "I'm fighting for my family. There's a difference." The final blow came that evening, delivered by a process server who handed Regina papers that made her blood run cold. Hadrian had obtained a temporary restraining order alleging that Kirk was a danger to Azalea's emotional well-being due to his unstable business practices and questionable character. "He can't see her," Regina realized with growing horror. "The order prevents Kirk from having any contact with Azalea until the hearing." Kirk's face went white, then flushed with rage. "That's not possible. I'm her father. A father whose paternity was only recently established and who has no legal custody arrangement," the process server said with professional indifference. "The order is valid until the emergency hearing next week." As the man left, Regina and Kirk stared at each other in the ruins of their carefully rebuilt world. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd worked toward, was being systematically destroyed by a man whose hatred knew no bounds. "He's trying to break us," Regina said, her voice barely above a whisper, "to make us turn on each other." "Never," Kirk said fiercely, pulling her into his arms. "Regina, we're stronger than his hate. What we have, what we've built, it's real, it's worth fighting for." "He's going to try to take her away from both of us," Regina whispered. "This isn't just about revenge against you anymore, Kirk. He wants to destroy our entire family." Kirk pulled her into his arms, and Regina could feel the tremor in his hands, the barely contained rage and fear that threatened to overwhelm them both. "Then we fight," he said quietly, his voice carrying the implacable determination that had built empires and conquered every obstacle he'd ever faced. "Regina, we fight for her, for us, for everything that matters, and we don't stop until we win. What if we lose?" The fear that had been clawing at her chest finally found voice. "We won't," Kirk said with absolute certainty. "Because love always wins, Regina. It might take time, it might require sacrifice, but love always finds a way." As they held each other in the growing darkness, both knowing that the next week would determine whether their love story had a happy ending or became a cautionary tale about the price of crossing dangerous men. Regina felt something fierce and unbreakable settle in her chest. Love had brought them back together. Love had given them a daughter who was wise beyond her years and brave enough to believe in fairy tale endings. And love, not the desperate passion of youth, but the mature, tested, unshakable love of two people who had chosen each other despite every obstacle, would see them through the greatest battle of their lives. The war for their family was just beginning, but Regina Wilson had never been more ready to fight. Chapter 10. Love's Eternal Promise. True love is not a fairy tale ending, but a daily beginning, a choice to fight for each other, to choose hope over fear, and to believe that some bonds are strong enough to withstand any force that tries to break them. The courthouse steps had never felt more like a battlefield. Regina stood between Kirk and his legal team, watching Hadrian Blackwood emerge from a black sedan with the confidence of a man who believed victory was already his. Behind him, Calliope Winters appeared like a malevolent shadow, her perfectly composed face betraying nothing of the venom Regina knew lay beneath. "They look so sure of themselves," Mirabelle murmured, standing protectively at Regina's shoulder. "I hope our surprise is worth it." Regina touched the envelope in her purse, the evidence that Caspian's investigation had finally uncovered. After days of relentless digging, they'd found the proof they needed. Financial records showing payments from Hadrian to a private investigator who had been stalking their family for months. Email communications between Hadrian and Calliope planning their coordinated attack, and most damning of all, recorded conversations revealing that Hadrian's real motivation wasn't protecting Azalea, but destroying Kirk by taking away everything he loved. "It will be," Kirk said quietly, his hand finding Regina's and squeezing gently. "We have the truth on our side." Inside the courtroom, Regina felt the weight of dozens of eyes watching their every move. The media attention had been relentless, turning their private pain into public spectacle. But as she looked across the courtroom and saw Azalea sitting with Kirk's trusted security detail, their daughter's small face trying so hard to be brave, Regina felt her resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. The hearing began with Hadrian's attorney painting a picture of Regina as a manipulative gold digger who had used her daughter as a pawn in an elaborate scheme to trap a wealthy man. He spoke of emotional damage to the child, of an unstable environment, of the need to protect Azalea from parents who put their own interests above her well-being. Regina listened to her character being assassinated with growing anger, watching the judge's expression for any sign of whether these lies were taking root. When Hadrian himself took the stand, his performance was masterful, a concerned citizen motivated only by compassion for an innocent child caught in the crossfire of adult selfishness. Then it was their turn. Kirk's attorney, Marcus Chen, was methodical in his destruction of Hadrian's narrative. He presented evidence of Regina's exemplary parenting, her successful gallery, her stable home environment. He showed the court photos of Azalea, radiant, confident, clearly loved and well cared for. He demonstrated Kirk's commitment to being a father, his consistent presence in Azalea's life since learning of her existence. But it was the recorded conversations that changed everything. Hadrian's voice filled the courtroom, caught on tape discussing his plan to destroy Kirk's family as the ultimate revenge. "If I can't destroy his company, I'll destroy what he loves most. Take the kid away from both of them, that will break them completely." Calliope's response was equally damning. "Regina Wilson thinks she's so noble, so pure. Let's see how noble she looks when the whole world thinks she's a scheming opportunist." The silence that followed was profound. Regina watched as Hadrian's confident mask cracked, his face paling as he realized the extent of their evidence. Across the courtroom, Calliope had gone rigid, her carefully maintained composure finally slipping. Judge Morrison's expression had shifted from skeptical to appalled. "Mr. Blackwood, these recordings suggest that your petition has nothing to do with the child's welfare and everything to do with personal vendettas against Mr. Lyles." The rest happened quickly. Hadrian's petition was dismissed with prejudice, the restraining order was vacated, and the judge issued stern warnings about the consequences of filing frivolous legal actions designed to harass families. But for Regina, the real victory came when Azalea was finally allowed to run into their arms, her small body fitting perfectly between her parents as if that was exactly where she belonged. "I knew you'd win," Azalea said fiercely, her arms around both their necks, "because we're a real family, and real families stick together no matter what." 6 months later, Regina stood in her childhood church, surrounded by flowers and loved ones, wearing a vintage lace gown that had belonged to Kirk's grandmother and carrying a bouquet of white roses mixed with paintbrushes. A touch that was purely Azalea's idea. The ceremony was everything their daughter had planned and more. The garden setting was perfect, the flowers abundant but not overwhelming, and when Kirk spoke his vows, his voice was steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Regina," he said, his hands holding hers as if they were the most precious things in his world. 10 years ago I lost you because I didn't know how to fight for what mattered most. I won't make that mistake again. I promise to choose you every day, to protect our love, to be the husband you deserve and the father our daughter needs. I promise to build with you not just a marriage, but a legacy of love that will last for generations." Regina's own vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "Kirk, you taught me that some love is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth everything. I promise to trust you with our hearts, to believe in our future, and to never again let fear keep us apart. I choose you, today and always, with everything I am." When Kirk slipped his grandmother's ring onto her finger, the diamond caught the sunlight like captured starlight. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Azalea cheered so loudly that the entire congregation burst into laughter. And when Kirk kissed his bride, it was with the passion of a man who had nearly lost everything and the reverence of someone who would never take such gifts for granted again. The reception was a celebration of not just their marriage, but their survival. Hadrian had been charged with harassment and stalking, while Calliope had disappeared from New York society, her reputation in ruins. Kirk's company had not only recovered, but was thriving, stronger than ever after weathering the storm. But as Regina watched her new husband dance with their daughter, she knew that the real victory wasn't the defeat of their enemies or the rebuilding of Kirk's empire. The real victory was the family they had created, scarred by the past, but committed to a future built on truth, trust, and the kind of love that could survive anything. Later that evening, in the art studio Kirk had built for her as a wedding gift, a sun-filled space attached to their new home where she could create without ever being far from her family. Regina began work on a new painting. It showed 3 figures silhouetted against a sunset, a man, a woman, and a child, all holding hands as they looked toward a horizon bright with promise. Kirk found her there as the stars began to appear, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you calling this one?" he asked softly. Regina leaned back against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart that now synchronized perfectly with her own. "Love's eternal promise," she said quietly. "Because that's what we are. What we've always been, even when we couldn't see it. A promise to love each other through everything, the storms and the sunshine, the mistakes and the miracles, the endings and the beginnings." Kirk turned her in his arms, his blue eyes reflecting the same wonder she felt at the miracle of their second chance. "I love you, Mrs. Lyles. I love you too, Mr. Lyles. Forever and always." Outside their studio window, they could hear Azalea's laughter as she played in the garden they were planting together. Their daughter, their joy, their proof that sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow in soil that has known both drought and storm. As Regina kissed her husband under the stars, surrounded by the family they had fought so hard to protect, she understood that their love story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Some love, she realized, was not meant to be easy. It was meant to be extraordinary, and extraordinarily worth fighting for.